Hello, my name's Ezra. I'm a system and network engineer by trade, and I'm an avid Home Assistant lover. In this video, I'll show you how to set up object detection in Home Assistant using Agent DVR and Deepstack Artificial Intelligence. Home Assistant is a powerful do-it-yourself platform to interoperate all smart home devices from various smart home ecosystems and third-party manufacturers. All data is locally processed and controlled for your privacy, and best of all, with no added fees. With the integration of object detection sensors, you'll be able to set up smart automations in Home Assistant with your ANNKE C800 as source image. So whether you're a beginner or an expert, you'll be able to implement object detection in your smart home after reading this guide today. Let's begin. In our guide, we've used the ANNKE C800 and the ANNKE NC400, which are both great cameras for their prices, and they're outperforming nearly all competitors in their tiers. We've added a YouTube video by The Hookup reviewing the C800 camera if you're interested. We're using the written guide as a reference. We'll link to it in the description. Here you'll see the index. Next we'll talk about the prerequisites. Next to that, what hardware and what setup is used by us in this guide. We've added some links to various pieces of documentation. Then we'll set up our ANNKE C800 camera. Then we'll integrate it in Home Assistant. After that, we'll add Agent DVR, Deepstack AI, and lastly, we'll set up the object detection in Home Assistant. And I've also included some installation one-liners for convenience. Now for the prerequisites. We assume that you have Home Assistant and Docker both installed already on an x86 device, and the additional software components can be installed all on the same device, like we are doing inside one virtual machine. Though you can divide it up and have everything running in one virtual machine or a container for each individual application. You can even run the additional software components on a Raspberry Pi or another Windows host, but that's out of the scope of this video guide. In this guide for our hypervisor, we're using Proxmox. You might be familiar with ESXi, VMware, VirtualBox, Windows Hyper-V, KVM, etc. Doesn't really matter as long as you create a Debian-based virtual machine. I've given it the IP of 192.168.9.235, and that's the main IP all the applications will use to talk to each other, and we'll install everything in one virtual machine. But you can easily install everything in an isolated container, each with their own IP. But for the sake of ease and for this guide, we'll install everything on one virtual machine. Please take note of all the ports of the services. For Home Assistant it's 123, excuse me. For Deepstack it's 90, and for Agent it's 8090. In terms of resources, I've allocated 8 virtual CPUs to the Debian virtual machine and 8 gigs of RAM, which is a bit of overkill, and you'll easily get away with half of both for a small multi-camera setup. So the virtual machine and the Proxmox container are, or hypervisor, sorry, are connected to my PoE switch, which in turn provides power and connectivity to my ANNKE camera, my ANNKE C800, which has the IP of 192.168.14.4 and is accessible via port 80. Once your IP camera is connected to the network, you'll have to figure out its IP address. You can do this by going to your router and checking the DHCP lease table, or you can go to the Google or Apple App Store and download Fing or Wi-Fi Man. These are neat apps that present you with a list of connected local clients. And if you're using an ANNKE camera, you can use the SADP software, which I've linked in the written guide. We already know our IP 14.4, so we'll log in. Alright, one thing I have to clarify beforehand, nearly every IP camera has a substream and a mainstream, where the mainstream is used for recording and the substream is used for streaming / motion detection. You can see we're using the second stream, the substream, and the quality, it isn't all that great. Then we'll switch over to 1. It shows how the weeds have grown. It's due to remove them, but you can see the quality is a lot better right now. And the reason for this is that the substream is just utilizing less bandwidth and giving less overhead to the network, right? So ideally you'd set the motion detection or the live stream to the sub one in order to save bandwidth and resources, and whenever motion is detected and the recording starts, you switch over to the mainstream. That's a little clarification because we'll be utilizing the sub and the mainstream later on in the guide as well, but I like to get that out of the way first. Okay, so let's head over to the configuration. Now go to time settings. Make sure you select the proper time zone. I've changed the default Windows one to pool.ntp.org. Make sure you're using the NTP server because we do want a proper time indication on our overlay on the camera footage. Hit test. Testing succeeded. Alright, hit save. Alright, and then go to security. Security services. I've already enabled it, but you are advised to enable illegal login lock and set the threshold at 5. So if anyone tries to log in with the wrong password for 5 times, they get blocked out. Hit save. Then head over to network, advanced. There we go. Head over to HTTPS. Click enable, enable, and hit save. And we're back using HTTPS. We'll leave the image settings all at default. So let's move on to the integration of this camera within Homeassistant. Set up our IP camera in Homeassistant. For this, we'll need to install Agent DVR, and Agent DVR is an advanced video surveillance platform. It can be installed on Windows, Mac, Linux, Raspberry Pi, you name it. It's the first MVR DVR software that we've came across that supported every camera we threw at it. In the past we had some issues with Synology Surveillance Station, ZoneMinder, Motion Eye, for example. They were unable to import certain cameras we had around, but Agent takes them all. Agent also has some cool features built in, which are object detection, facial recognition, license plate recognition or registration, and advanced motion detection, and a vast pool of supported cameras. We'll use Docker Compose to install Agent. So let's head over to our command line. I mentioned that our IP for the virtual machine was 192.168.9.235. So let's SSH over there using a terminal or PuTTY or whatever. And we're logged in. So I have the Docker Compose script handy already. There we go. It's Agent DVR YAML. Alright. So this is our Docker Compose file. You see we've set the UID and the group ID of this local folder. So it'll store our recordings within that folder. Note that this location is inside the container. And this is on the virtual machine. And that's where all the recordings are being stored. Also, make sure you set the time zone correctly. And then we're ready to set up Agent DVR. Compose -F, because we're specifying a file. YAML, up and detached. Starting, started. Alright. Let's see. Up and running. So let's head over to port 8090 on the virtual machine IP in the web browser. And there we go. Agent DVR is installed. What we'll do now is add our camera. Go to the top left, middle icon, add new device, select display slot, click on the first, IP camera wizard, make sure you tick alert, hit OK. Alright, in our case it's the C800 and it's listed. If your camera is not listed, please select the unlisted option at the bottom. For now, we'll select ANNKE C800. The username is admin. Password is super secret. Leave the channel at 0. Hit next. Let's specify the IP address of the camera here. That was 14.4. And hit next, so it starts the search. Alright, and we have a big list of possible endpoints for video. In our case, we'll be using the ONVIF. Select, alright. And there we go. We have our camera inside Agent. So let's give the camera a name. There we go. Hit the 3 dots right beside the ONVIF at source type. And here you'll see the live URL and the record URL. These are the ones I mentioned earlier. The record URL is the high resolution URL for direct recording. That's number 1. So we'll select 1 here. And for the live URL, we'll use the second substream. Alright, hit OK. Then enable MQTT events. Leave the frame rate. That's the frame rate it'll use on the live stream and not on the recording stream. If by any chance you have distorted video or your image quality is super bad, have a look if toggling the resize button does the job for you. Next, head over to Actions, and within the action part we'll add 2 commands. One of them will report to Homeassistant the state of the object detection, and the other one will provide some details on what was detected and the confidence, etc. So please click Add. If Deepstack object is found, then we want to MQTT, and the topic will be object detection / name. Just leave it at this, it'll automatically fill in the camera name / state. And what we'll post is on, that the object detection is on. So whenever Deepstack found an object, it'll use MQTT publish on the topic stated here, where name, the variable name, will automatically be populated, and it will post on. So Homeassistant knows that the object detection is triggered and it has detected an object. Click OK, and then we'll add a second one. Same thing here, Deepstack object found, MQTT, and here the topic will be object detection, name, and JSON, and what we'll post is the JSON results of the object detection. I'll clarify that later. Hit OK, and you should have 2 tasks for the object detection found using MQTT. Next, we'll go to alerts. Under intelligence, enable and filter on failure. Next, hit configure. For now, we'll use person and remote, which I'll demonstrate later. We'd like to save the photos if an object is detected, and prevent repeat. Click OK. Now we'll head over to detector. Make sure it's set to objects. Then we'll go to object recognition. And you might think that these are the same settings we set earlier under the intelligence section, under alerts, and that's true. There's a difference. Under intelligence, those settings are used for Agent DVR's motion events and alerts. So right now we've configured it to only fire an alert whenever a person or a remote is detected within the frame, as opposed to everything, every moving pixel, right? Every leaf blowing in the frame is otherwise considered as motion. But right now we've set it up that only motion is triggered by a person or a remote. Now within object recognition here, these are used to fire up, for example, the MQTT events that we'll use within the automation. So we'll enable it. Again, I'd like photos and prevent repeat, person, remote, and that's it. Click OK. So now we'll head over to Homeassistant and we'll add the Agent DVR integration in order for us to make use of the camera inside of Homeassistant. Head over to Homeassistant, configuration, devices and services, and then we'll hit add integration. Now search for Agent DVR. The host is our virtual machine. imports the default one. Submit. Alright. Success. So we have an alarm panel where you can configure if the entire camera system is armed or not. And you have an entity for each camera. And you could give them an area. But for now we won't. Finish. 2 entities. Let's check out the camera. There we go. This is the alarm control panel. It'll reflect the settings whenever you arm or disarm within Agent DVR itself. And you can control it vice versa from Homeassistant to reflect to Agent DVR. So now what we'll have to do is set up Deepstack. Deepstack analyzes the frames it's given by Agent whenever motion is detected, and Deepstack will report back the results to Agent DVR. And in order to set up Deepstack, we'll also use Docker. So head over back to the virtual machine. Again, I have it handy. Right here. Again, I've made sure that the group ID and the user ID matches my recordings folder. So you see it's owned by the user dietpy. And if I do ID dietpy, you see the user ID and the group ID is 1000, and that's the same as here. Otherwise you'll have issues storing the data on your machine. And again, please make sure the time zone is correct. Then we'll head over to running the Docker Compose. Back in Agent DVR, go to Settings, Intelligence, which is our virtual machine, and port 90. Leave the rest at default. Head over to MQTT. Enable it. Enter your Homeassistant server. In our case, it's 9.235. Leave the rest at default. Client ID, Agent DVR, and for username, enter your Homeassistant user and password. Click OK. We'll head over to Homeassistant again. And what we'll want to do now is set up MQTT. Head over to Add-ons, Add-on Store, and click the Mosquito Broker. Click Install. And hit Start. So now we've set up the Mosquito MQTT Broker, which acts as a server. And now we'll also need to set up the client so that Homeassistant can subscribe to certain topics in order to extract data from those topics to use them in our binary sensor. So in order to do that, head over to Configuration, click on Add Integration, search for MQTT. The broker resides on our virtual machine. Leave the port at default. For the username and password, log in with the same user you log in to Homeassistant. Submit. Created. There we go. So now Homeassistant can subscribe to MQTT topics and read that information. Because like I said, the broker is just a standalone server and doesn't yet talk to Homeassistant. That's why we've set up this integration. So what we'll have to do now is add the binary sensor to the Homeassistant configuration.yaml. To do so, we'll install Visual Studio Code. Click Install. Click Show in Sidebar. And start. Let's trust the authors, yes. Alright. Now, top left, click configuration.yaml. And in the written guide, I referenced the binary sensor configuration. So you can copy and paste it over. There we go. A few things we have to change. You have to change this to your camera name. And it has to be an exact match, including caps. There we go. Hit Ctrl S to save. And now what we'll do is restart Homeassistant. Alrighty. As Homeassistant is restarting, we can also go ahead and restart our Agent DVR Docker to apply all the settings we've configured earlier. So that's a Docker restart, Agent DVR. There we go. Once Homeassistant is restarted, we should be able to go to the developer tools and search for object detection, and now our binary sensor is visible. Right now it's off and it won't be detecting anything. For that reason I've set up a test stream, which is just a video in a loop, in order for us to have some objects to detect. Now let's head over to the dashboard, where I've added picture glance card for each camera, also containing the binary sensor. If we click it, we can see a nice history graph, the state of the object detection, and the results of the latest detection will be shown here. The label, what's detected, the location, and the confidence. Confidence is a scale from 0 to 1, so this would be around 46%. Now you might be wondering, where are the results stored? For that we'll go to Agent, head over to Photos, there we go. We have our results. So this detection would result in something like this in Homeassistant. There we go. The state of the object detection went on of the ANNKE C800 camera. We've got a backpack, a person, and an umbrella. So there we go. How awesome is that? Let's check out some more results of the object detection. Remote control. truck, person, umbrella, car. And one other tip, within Agent, if you press the bell icon, you'll also see the latest alerts. That concludes our guide. If you have any questions, just leave a comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more Home Assistant videos. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.